Hello, everyone. This is Claire Smith reporting for duty in Mr. Glanville's classic Yukon. Thank you for having me. I will speak for as long as my voice holds out. It's been on and off for several weeks now, but I'm happy to be here and assist in any way that I can. I understand the topic is how one deals with adversity in their field and when to take a stand, when to use a phrase from World War II, retreat in the other direction to fight a bigger fight, a more important fight another day. Uh, I've been blessed to have this career in covering baseball in one form or another since 1982. And in that time, the field and the battlefield have changed in ways I never imagined. The constant is that there is always a need for and a hunger for the most precise, relevant, accurate pictures that one can paint with either words or with a camera. And that's been my goal since I started covering my first major league beat, 1982, Yankees. And it's been embedded in my heart, I hope, and in my work, I pray, since then. Uh, I get asked two questions more so than any other. What was it like starting out and being noted for being a woman in a field dominated by men? And also, how was it to be one of the few African Americans in that field? So I guess I had the double whammy, the double privilege. And the answer I give when they're asking those questions are asked in conjunction is that I never, ever, ever felt the same sort of pushback on the basis of race that I did on the basis of gender. I think that is because of several factors. When I started, baseball had a large population of African American players. The Yankees were thoroughly integrated, and I must say, those players were very protective, not only of me as an African American, but of the women on the beat. I often wondered why, and that that question was finally posed at the first ever convention of the Association for Women in Sports Media when the future Hall of Fame uh, defensive back, I believe, I apologize if this isn't correct, Ronnie Lott, was asked the question, why did it seem that African American players were more cooperative, more empathetic towards female reporters? And his answer has stuck with me throughout the decades. He said, because we know what it's like to walk into a room and be instantly hated. Well, that was so often the case in covering baseball. Once you got off the East Coast, Boston, Philly, the New Yorks, Baltimore, and moved towards the West, the teams were more resistant. They had fewer media outlets to deal with, and certainly fewer women reporters were jumping to the fore to cover Major League Baseball. So I always felt uh, comfortable is not the word, but accepted in when I covered the Yankees, would switch over to the Mets, depending on the pennant races. When I covered the Yankees in Baltimore, Boston, when I covered the Mets in Philadelphia, always felt that baseball's quote unquote protective arm, if you will, that is the policy that credentialed reporters will all be treated the same, was firmly around my efforts to do my job. Uh, once you went west, it wasn't always the case. There were pockets of fierce resistance, San Diego, Atlanta, and Cincinnati, and they just pushed back and pushed back, often ignoring the rules or players just refusing to speak with you. Hostilities, I endured far fewer, but when you endure them, you had to stand up to them and test the sport and its rules to see if the sport was going to enforce its own rules. Often it did, when utterly forced to recognize something heinous, hideous, and just downright awful, i.e. Dave Kingman sending a live rat wrapped as a gift to Susan Fornoff during a game out in Oakland, California. That sort of thing kind of demands some action from the highest levels of Major League Baseball, and they did react. Proactive, when I was pushed out of the playoff locker room of the San Diego Padres in 1984. It was during Peter Ueberroth's first week as commissioner, and he was made aware that clubs set their own rules during the season, and the Padres tried to carry their own rules into the playoffs, and Ueberroth said enough. He basically pulled all credentialing under the commissioner's office umbrella, said anyone carrying an official credential approved by Major League Baseball has access to all of its clubs, regular season and postseason. Again, it's a rule, and each club was left to enforce that rule, and if it didn't, we had an avenue to the commissioner's office to make the commissioner's office aware. Unlike colleges, individual clubs were not allowed to close their clubhouses to all media in order to keep women out, so that was helpful. Getting back to the issue of race, it's probably harder when I started to make race an issue because there were just so many superstars who were African American, and they sat in the clubhouse, and I would think it would be very intimidating to sit in a clubhouse with a Dave Winfield, a Don Bittler, Reggie Jackson, on and on, Joe Morgan, Willie Stargell, my God, and do something that is so overtly racist that you invite not only the venom of your management and the commissioner's office, but also your fellow players. The tiny little pushback that was expressed when baseball said that every player would wear 42 on Jackie Robinson Day was quashed. It went nowhere, and that's, I believe, the way anything overtly racist, how it would end, with a big giant number 12, number 14 spike stepping on it. So I never felt that. I don't know if any of this is very relevant to 2020, and I'd like to think that 1984 and preceding that, Melissa Lutkey's lawsuit against the Yankees in baseball that opened up clubhouses had everything to do with this being almost a non-issue today. That said, you can legislate out gender bias and racism. You can't make stupid people be smart about those things. So you will still hear about issues. You will still have to monitor and critique the way the leagues and the reporters outlet and the players respond to controversy. It's always going to be there, the idiocy, and the personal ability to push back and be moronic. But I think that we've come a long way, and it has to do with people like Melissa and executives like Peter Ueberroth. So I'm going to stop it there, send this tape to Doug, and hopefully it will spark some conversations amongst you. Take care. Thank you.